Alibaba, Saturday mornings at 11. Visit healthquestradio.com.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Good piece about K through 12 education from our next guest, Jon Miltimore, in which he reminds us what Carl Sagan said decades ago. You know Carl Sagan, billions and billions of stars. That Carl Sagan, American astronomer. Mm-hmm. My experience is, this is Sagan, my experience is you go talk to kindergarten kids or first grade kids, you find a class full of science enthusiasts, and they ask deep questions. What is a dream? Why do we have toes? Why is the moon round? What is the birthday of the world? Why is grass green? These are profound, important questions. They just bubble right out of them. You go talk to 12th grade students, and there's none of that. They've become leaden and incurious. Something terrible has happened between kindergarten and 12th grade, and it's not just puberty. Well, I mean, boy, if that was Sagan's observation several decades ago, what would it be now? Because things have gotten markedly worse, in part because, as I am wont to argue, so little has changed in the intervening time. Even with what we know to be true about how kids learn, it doesn't matter. All we've done is funnel more money on the front end and be satisfied with credentials on the back end, even if those credentials don't mean much, and certainly don't mean as much as they did several generations ago. Well, we talked a bit earlier in the show, that Catherine Boyle speech about America's silent war, those who seek to undermine America. How do you win a war against America? How about by destroying the schools from the inside? For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by the aforementioned Jon Miltimore, who is the editor at the Foundation for Economic Education, fee.org. Jon, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Dan.
Yeah, so I mean, just develop, since it's your piece, you pulled a Sagan reference from a bygone era, which is a great one. Your distillation of that, including as per a conversation you had with a cheesehead, a friend of yours.
Yeah, no, I am a cheesehead. We got the big game tomorrow. Yeah, for me it was amazing seeing Carl Sagan see something that he observed that we're not supposed to talk about in America. We're really supposed to kind of cheer on the school system and talk about how great it is. Sagan looked at it and he saw something, very different. And he doesn't say why the schools were failing. That's something I talk about in the article. But first, I was just impressed that he said this, and he was being challenged during his interview when he said it. And he said, no, our schools are failing. And the truth is, we do run schools today almost like prisons. They're very regimented, very structured. And it is a system that has been failing for decades. If you go back, since the Department of Education was launched in the mid-1970s, we've gotten worse across everything. Everything, every metric we have, we've gotten worse, even though we keep spending more and more money. I think in Chicago, the average per capita spending is close to $30,000. Mm-hmm. And the thing that Sagan didn't address, like I said, is why they're failing. But I think we got to just acknowledge it is a system. The system we have does not work, no matter how much we fund it. And this is something I just had a parent-teacher conference with my daughter's middle school, and I was so impressed that the teachers themselves, this is not about the teachers. I think this is something people need to understand. There are good individuals in school systems. They care about your kids. They want to educate your kids. They want a good school. It's the system that is a disaster. It has all the wrong incentives. It's really about churning out money. It's about empowering unions. It has all the wrong incentives, and we've been ignoring it for decades.
Well, right. And the good news is that school choice is on the march in a lot of places.
Yes.
But the bad news is it's still painstaking, the expansion, particularly depending on the political power structure in a given state. Even in Texas, where they struggle to see school choice advance.
It is, and this isn't, something as simple as Democrat and Republicans. If you look, there's a lot of, Democrats in cities who are getting behind the school choice movement. Whereas, like, if you look at in Texas, unions really have a good foothold in the Republican Party there. There's a lot of, Republicans who are vociferously opposing school choice. So this is complex politically, but I think you're right. The march is on. Like, and it's largely because Americans are finally seeing what Carl Sagan saw 30 years ago. They're seeing that this isn't working. And when you pointed out, when Sagan first observed that, okay, I was in school about that time. I was in high school, maybe middle school when he wrote that. I'm like, I would have thought, my school's okay. But he saw how bad they were, and since then it's gotten so much worse. Kids are just inundated with all kinds of, let's face it, it's more propaganda. They're getting lots of social justice indoctrination, gender ideology, and all this. And there are, and they're still getting some math and English along the way. And as I said, there's good teachers in there, but the system has all the wrong incentives.
And then, just translating, that no more was this on display than during COVID. And I noted that you took judicial notice of that sad little man, Tony Fauci, doing a bit of an about-face on vaccine mandates these days.
Yeah, well, for listeners who don't know, and they probably don't, it got almost no media coverage. Fauci now thinks it's okay that every American should have the choice of whether or not they get vaccinated. He didn't use those words, but he is very clear. He used the word choice, and then he said, quote, make the vaccine available to everyone, but certainly recommend it to high-risk people. So he's even saying high-risk people, we should just recommend the vaccine to them and not force them. And to me, this is very noteworthy. Throughout the pandemic, he always talked about vaccine mandates in support of them because he said they worked. They worked in the sense that it got people to do what he wanted them to do. But, that really isn't a scientific approach. He should be saying why he thinks vaccination is good and leave the ethics, and that's an ethical question, not a scientific question about whether somebody should be coerced into taking this. He should have left that for other people. But throughout this, he really took his approach as I am the science, and here's what I say, and this is what you should do.
Right, and don't deny science. You're denying me. But also, he did lie to the American people and said if you get vaccinated, you can't give anybody COVID or get COVID, which was a bold-faced lie. So why do you think
over and over, and it wasn't just Fauci that made that claim, right? And that you could smell that one out from the beginning. The fact that this idea that if you got vaccinated, you couldn't get COVID, you couldn't spread COVID, and that might be part of the reason he's done this about face. Is just the simple acknowledgement that the vaccines aren't doing what they initially claimed they could do.
Well, not to mention, we're still trying to recover from the policy response to COVID. The K through 12 schools, there's been a lot of ink spilled over that. That's obvious. Also, this headline this week, Army scrambling to get back soldiers it kicked out over Biden's military vaccine mandate. So, we have a recruitment problem in our military ranks, too. And now they're trying to mea culpa some of these guys to get back into serving our country in uniform again. Another consequence.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like, this is really, the politics of this has shifted a lot. And another little notice story, the DOJ, you can go out there, they're hiring, I think it's 8 or 10 new lawyers. The DOJ is preparing for a big lawsuit. And under federal law, people that were injured by the vaccine, they can't sue Pfizer or Moderna, but they are, they're suing the Department of Justice on this. Really? And there was recently a federal court case in Louisiana that advanced. So the politics of this are suddenly much more dicey. And I think that's what Fauci, he was always somebody that was going to take the path of least resistance. He wasn't acting on principle. He wasn't acting on science. I think he had some of those mixed in there, but really he was kind of doing what made sense politically at the time, which is why now suddenly he's singing a very different song on vaccine mandates. I'm glad he's come around and acknowledges that Americans should have the choice whether to take the vaccine or not. It's just a shame it took him so long to get here.
But I mean, these numbers are astronomical to me. 8,000 U.S. service members were discharged from the military for refusing to take the vaccine.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, look beyond even that. Look at how many people, private workers that were nurses, and all these people that were fired because they decided they didn't want to take this.
Pilots.
And this isn't whether or not vaccines are good or bad, right? Like I'm not. I encourage some loved ones during the pandemic. I said you're probably somebody that should maybe consider this. It wasn't about that. It was about who got to choose what was best for them.
Jon Miltimore is the editor at fee.org, FEE.org, Foundation for Economic Education. John, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Thanks, Amy. You guys have a great Thanksgiving.
All right, you too. And if you want to check him out on Twitter, Miltimore79, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM 560